Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here at Daily Wolves. I am Will, your host, and today I'm joined by Chris in what feels like a rare occasion, Chris, because we're meeting up off the back of what feels like a positive result. I think, and it makes a change. We've been doing this for some time now, and it's weird to think that the mood is relatively upbeat for once.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose we started this venture together before this new season kicked off, and we had all the optimism of pre-season, living the dream. The heady heights were all available, and it hasn't quite worked out that way. I suppose quite. This is quite random.
On that note, obviously Nathan and I spoke yesterday about the Brighton result and the game in general, and I just wanted, first of all, your overall analysis of the game in terms of what sort of the biggest thing that you've taken away from that performance.
Well, the biggest thing, probably something I should come on to later, but to be honest, the biggest thing I took away from the performance was something said afterwards. But actually, no, let's focus on the performance.
Okay. So I'm intrigued now.
I suppose the biggest thing was, once again, we were creators of our own downfall with Jose Sarr and the poor ball out from the back, giving away that moment that led to their opening goal. And it's a shame because overall I think he had another pretty solid game.
Mm-hmm.
Good stops. What I did like was he was most of the time quite commanding in the box. He looked more authoritative than Johnston has done in his performances. The way he was commanding his box, coming out early for crosses, taking the ball, one-handed, just plucking it out from someone, and he resonated a confidence, and so it was such a shame for that moment to just bring it all down. So that was frustrating. Overall, though, I think again second half he was solid. So like you guys mentioned, it may count against him, that moment, in the long run, but I feel like overall he's still been, he's been pretty solid. The other thing I wanted to highlight, and you guys mentioned him, but I was so happy because I feel like I've been one of the stalwarts on the show of,
I think I know where you're going with this.
I'm the Sarabia fan, and so yes, I know he had one moment where he and Doyle kind of miscommunicated, and he played a poor pass that gave away an opportunity to Brighton. If you remember that, there was a moment where he came on shortly after he'd just come on, bearing in mind he hasn't played in the Premier League since he's made one appearance right at the start of the season, I think, and then in the first few minutes gave the ball away, maybe a little bit of rust, but overall immediately I felt, and I don't know if anyone else noticed this, some of his, he's finding the space, finding the pockets that we've spoken about, and creating some great opportunities like little through balls and playing into space. And he gave us that different aspect, which I think sometimes we lack. And part of that is that there was more, the formation had shifted when he came on. So it was 4 at the back and trying to be more direct. But still, when those moments come and when there is an opportunity to have an extra person up front, I feel like I'm just upset he doesn't get more time. I feel like he's shining in those moments, and we had so many opportunities that came about when he was on the pitch.
Yeah, no, I just think, I echo completely what you just said. I think his quality speaks for itself, and I think it's weird, actually, on a personal point of view, from O'Neill. It seems strange how he has a few sort of, I don't want to say favourites, but there's certainly some players who, Sarr being one of them, who for whatever reason he just simply doesn't rate, or so it seems, and Sarabia's certainly been one of those. Which, when you take into consideration some of the decisions O'Neill has been making for people who he has been playing when perhaps they shouldn't be, it's really confusing, I think. I mean, you think of I don't want to, and again, this is nothing against these players, but you think of the likes of Hwang. I think of at the start of the season, the dropping Dawson, or I know you mentioned how he's still coming back from injury, but like there's little decisions like that, and then you consistently leave out a player of Sarabia's quality. It's just, I don't know, it's strange. Strange.
Especially late on in games when he's just got experience. Sometimes you just want that experience, that level head, to whether it's to go to the corner, whether it's to hold the ball up, whatever it is. Someone who's not going to panic so much under pressure, maybe as some of the younger players. Just that level head coming on a little bit later in games, even if he's not starting. However, some of the other keynotes that I wanted to mention were, I thought it was interesting finally that Lemina came off at half time. I thought that was, as much as we love him, I thought it was a great thing for that to happen, because he has been underperforming, to his standards. And I was glad. Is that bad to say? I was glad that he came off.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I don't think there's a bigger. I don't think there's a bigger fan of him than myself. As you know, like you just mentioned, we love him, but it was good to see O'Neill making these hard decisions. At least I think credit where credit is due, at least.
Yeah, and the other thing I thought was interesting, and I'm sure you were happy with, that when we shifted to 4 at the back, it was Totti that came off, not Bueno.
Yeah.
Now, I thought that was really interesting, considering he's been kind of out in the cold for a lot of the season and last season. And now, yes, we're short on defenders now, as we've always been pretty much, but it's always been Totti over Bueno. And then he's performed really well. I thought he had actually an outstanding game. He's one of my man of the matches. Like, I thought he was really solid, particularly second half when we were more aggressive and he was being encouraged to go forward with Dawson and and hold the ball up and be involved. And he's not afraid to do that. We've seen him before go off on a bit of a run occasionally and try and be there for a cross that really should be for a forward. I was really impressed with Santi Bueno. I hope this means he's going to get, obviously if we're 3 at the back, he definitely will. But if there's 4 at the back, then I hope maybe that means he's going to get a few more shots to be in that starting lineup.
Yeah, another one who, falls into the Sarabia category of, should have had a lot more game time, during this start to the season. And I do want to reiterate something I said with Nathan, and just going back to Sarabia, sorry, it just popped into my head when we mentioned it, which is that, he's kind of can be seen as one of those luxury players who perhaps isn't what a team who's fighting and battling against relegation potentially it needs, but at the same time it's still early days, and it's been early days up until this point, and to not see him, I suppose, it's just been mind-boggling. And there's a few players like that who had good performances. Again, Doyle, someone who I think we'll come on to him a bit later on.
But overall, if I may, though, the overall feeling I took obviously was, like everyone, there was that sense of doom and gloom when it was all going wrong and we're 2 goals down and it's here we go again. But then, given the manner of the comeback, the manner of the resilience, the fact obviously that it's such a late turnaround is always exhilarating, given the equalizing goal in added time. So I can't deny that I was at that point, I was on a high, as I'm sure many were ecstatic, like everyone ecstatic, and who was at the away end, what I was watching from afar. But that still, that exhilaration of the late equalizer, there's nothing quite like it. Apart from obviously if we'd scored a third, but overall, so on the day, massively happy for it to turn around the way it did. Left me feeling really positive, obviously, for the rest of that day, and like many people, just hoping above hope that the manner in which it turned around so late in the game gives them a belief going into these next 2 home games.
Yeah, I mean, whenever there's a late equaliser that late on and in that fashion, in that manner, as you mentioned, it almost feels like a winner.
Mm.
And speaking of winners, here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencaster came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencaster. And I think, Chris, it's time for our listeners to learn more about Tommy Doyle, because he created the equalising goal for us,
He
and
did.
just gave a really good account of himself.
Yep.
Um,
I was pleased to
and
see his name on the team sheet. I really
yeah,
was.
yeah, of course, and rightly so. And it begs the question of going forward. I mean, O'Neill's spoken about not having headaches, in terms of Sarr and Johnston, but surely that sort of midfield four, those four central midfielders, one of which is his captain who's underperforming. The other the other two are Brazilian internationals, one of which they've just signed for a decent sum of money, and then the other's Tommy Doyle.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be a sort of headache there, and a positive one in a way. It's healthy competition for places, but I just want to know what would you do? What would your decision be if you were in O'Neill's shoes about those midfield spaces?
Well, I think the biggest debate that, and a lot of people have been discussing, is the fact that, particularly when you look at João Gomez and Andre, they're very similar. You add
Mm-hmm.
Lamina into that mix, again, slightly different to those two, but they're all much of a muchness. They're all very more defensive-minded, aggressive midfielders. And there's been an inkling for a long time that maybe that's too much similarity. Doyle, I think, just gives a bit more variation in that midfield. We saw with the way he was in that moment leading up to the equalising goal. His first thought, even in a moment that was milliseconds before was potentially catastrophic, is immediately to look up and see where he can put the ball forward. And that's who he is always. And because he's very much, we spoke before about, he's obviously not yet, should we say, let's be optimistic, in the same caliber as someone like your beloved Neves. However,
I knew you were
much
going
like
there.
it, that's similarly, that's his style, isn't it? He wants to put those raking passes out. He wants to be the playmaker that can sit deep and put those brilliant, gorgeous long balls or passes into offensive areas. And Will's crying now, but I can't deny that I think he gives us a bit more variation in there. So
Look,
I think he has to potentially take the place of one of those three.
yeah, and I'll put you on the spot here because I also love Tommy Doyle's lovely long balls.
I knew that was where you're going. Phrasing is everything. Phrasing is everything.
But if you had to choose one of those three to drop, would it be Andre? Who would it be? Or would it be two of them? Would you go for three up front and then two in midfield? What would you do?
Well, this is where we potentially need to get onto what I mentioned about the post-match. That was the most interesting thing I brought from the day, because I think it affects this very decision. Was in his post-match, they asked him they were asking him obviously about the dig game and about the tactics and the shift in position at half-time and all that kind of stuff.
This is O'Neill, by the way.
O'Neill, sorry, talking after the match. And he said about how I can't remember the exact phrasing, but basically he ummed and ahed before the game about whether it should be a 5 or a 4, and he realised that the 5 wasn't right, that it should have been that they were more dynamic with the 4, and he kind of got the impression that he wished he should have gone with his gut beforehand and played with the 4 at the back to give us the more aggression and more attacking style. And it immediately made me think that we will see him revert to the back 4 for the next games. Now,
right. Sorry, just I'm gonna have to jump in there because I
Okay.
had this. I can't remember if I did mention it to Nathan yesterday, but I had this conversation with my dad after the game. And first of all, if we weren't in this position in the table, I would be filled with confidence by the fact that we've got that flexibility as a team, which we do have. We've got the players that allow us to drop in between a 4 and a 5. But I mean, my thoughts on it with the current standings. But my sort of, what I'm not looking forward to is when we play Palace at home is we rock up on Saturday evening. You've had your Bovril.
Oh yeah.
We've paid 70 quid to get in. And you turn up and you see an hour before the game that it's a back four with no Santiago Bueno and Sam Johnson's in goal. And Palace won, by the way, the other day. So they're in good form. They just beat Spurs, you know. And this game is bigger than big in terms of what it means to the club. I think if we lose, then we're, 7 points adrift from safety. So because I agree with you, I can see him going forwards with that 4, and I just don't think. I just think it's too big of a risk when it's been proven to not work so far this season, and it does worry me. And another thing on it, and I can't stress this enough. Again, I don't want to be too doom and gloom, but I do think it's worth pointing out that if the pass that Doyle intercepted, which led to our equaliser, if that was a yard either side, in that split second, then this isn't a conversation we'd even be entertaining. I don't think.
No, I know. To give credit to him, to give credit to Doyle. Sorry for a second. I do think you can see that he does anticipate. Like he takes this. You see, like a fraction of a moment before where he takes the step forward because he anticipates that that's where the pass is going to go. He's playing the odds, but he makes the right choice. You've got to play the odds in that moment, and he makes a good choice.
No, 100%. Yeah.
But yeah, I totally get it. But yeah, I think that he will go based on his comments, based on the fact that the second half got the 2 goals to equalise and the momentum. I think he's going to revert to the back 4 because I think he'll want to be aggressive at home and try and go all out for the points. So I think he will do that. In answer to your earlier question, if it was the 5 at the back and the 3 across midfield, then I think, given current form, I would actually start with Lemina on the bench.
And can I just ask who your captain would be?
Then because there is vice captains, right? And I'm trying to think who it is. Is it Doyle at the moment? I think Doyle's a vice captain, right?
He's one of them.
Is it Dawson?
This is who I think we all suspected it to be, but Semedo ended up with the armband against Brighton.
Yeah, so if he'd been off,
I'm all for it.
Yeah,
I'm all for it.
He's experienced enough. He's one of the more senior players. I imagine if he hadn't been on, then it would have been Doyle, right? Because I knew that he was at least one of them, which is crazy given his age. But I think he is a future captain.
Yeah, he's certainly got that, leadership quality about him, and it's actually making me sad now because you spoke about, that quality, that leadership quality at such a young age, and it does just remind me of Neves, and
I know.
such positive ways. Though I think if we can even, I don't want to say replace, but even if Doyle can replicate half the player that Neves was at such a young age, then it fills with excitement to see what he can go on and do, hopefully with us. And that leadership quality is actually something I wanted to speak about, not just from Doyle's point of view, but from the players as a whole. No matter what the formation or the tactics or whatever, I think the most obvious sort of thing was that they were fighting for the points. For the fans, for the club, for the manager, for each other. and that's really promising, because there's been other times this season where that's not been the case. It's just been completely flat in terms of tactics and spirit. I just think, to see the reactions of like Strand Larsen, when the goal went in and so on, it was just, it was really good to see.
Yeah, the spirit, that's the most hopeful aspect, is that the spirit still seems to be together. They still seem to be get together as a unit and together as a squad, which, because if that was falling apart, then it's over. But there still seems to be a togetherness, which is what you want. And also, in regards to, if it was a two in midfield because we went four at the back, then I think it would have to be Gomez and Doyle for now. Purely, I'm going on that on the way as well, that Gomez has got a bit more Premier League experience at the moment than Andre, just to, level that out. And in terms of what I said about Lamina being on the bench, I just think, if you think back to the performances so far this season, as much as we love him, the stupid penalty he gave away against Brentford, some of his poor decisions in desperate clearances when he's just gifted the ball to the opposition.
Yeah.
There's been some really, really poor decision making. And I mentioned in a previous episode, I don't know if it is that curse of, like, the captain's curse of just being trying too hard, but it's just not clicking for him right now.
No, it's not. And it's actually, it's really upsetting, because he's the one player who going into the season, who I'd never have expected to sort of, I don't want to say let us down, but let us down in terms of, being the captain and leading by example. It's, it's something certainly not quite right. But before we go into any more detail about, moving away from Brighton and onto Crystal Palace and further afield, I'd just like to give out a quick reminder that this podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network, every club, every day. But sorry, Chris, just looking forwards then. Because when I spoke to Nathan, and he sort of echoed this to a certain extent, don't get me wrong, I was absolutely buzzing with the late points. You can't not be.
No.
That's what the fans travel for. That's why we love football, is because of how high it can make you feel from out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I saw that so many people had left at 2-0 down.
Yeah.
Never do that. I'm sorry. The amount of times, like, I was at that game, was it in our Premier League campaign in the early 2000s, was it when we beat Leicester 4-3, I think it was, and that was like a second half comeback. You just never know.
That was Nuno era.
No. There was one earlier under Mick McCarthy.
The exact same thing happened. It must have been before my time then.
Yeah. Long time back.
Yeah. No, you know something. I've never left a game early. Like, not even once. There's been times where I've really wanted to, and I put that down. I don't take credit for that. I put that down to my dad, who I always go with, who's, from kickoff till 90 plus 10 minutes, as we have now in this day and age.
You never know.
When
you've paid your money, get your money's worth.
Yeah, no, we well and truly haven't we? It ain't cheap. But yeah, so just looking forward, sorry. I mentioned to Nathan that the point, as much as it was great, as much as you feel great and you enjoy it and it's fantastic, I can't help but feel as though Nathan put it perfectly when he said that it sort of papered over the cracks a little bit. And that sort of echoes my thoughts on it, is that it's, it's lovely, but I I mean, and you make your own luck, but I do think we were lucky, and I do think O'Neill is very, very lucky. Like I said, if the ball that Doyle does so well to intercept, if that Brighton player does anything but what he did do, then, we're coming at this podcast from a very, very different angle. I just wanted to, I wanted to know where you sit now with O'Neill, given that, as I said, we're recording after what feels like a relatively positive result.
Yeah, I think I'm still very much on edge, as I mentioned, partly because of those comments after the game about the tactics, which I think means he is going to shift. On the one hand, I can see why, because he wants to take these, try and get all 6 points at home over the next couple of games. I get that, but the way it was mentioned, I don't know, it just scared me a little. And I feel like, again, if he doesn't, if it all goes, I feel like he still needs to get the points from these 2 games to kind of validate that he's still in the right, I don't know, just okay for the ride to come. Am I making any sense? Just that.
Yeah, no, you are.
I feel like there's still a lot. I know we all know these games are massive, but I feel like that second half, for example, we saw substitutions that we wouldn't have seen and things we wouldn't have seen if it wasn't 2-0 down and the possible end of his run. We hadn't seen Rodrigo Gomez in gosh know how long, and he magically appeared towards the end of that game. Guedes came on, Sarabia coming on for the first time since the beginning of the season. All these things that happened, I feel like were desperation plays because of the situation, and we wouldn't have seen them otherwise. They don't feel necessarily like they are strategic masterclasses, because where have they been before? Where has Sarabia been the rest of the time when he could have helped us? Where has Guedes been the rest of the time outside of cup games? I know he's made a few fleeting appearances, but we mentioned they're always like 5 minutes to go or something. There's no hope. So yeah, I'm ecstatic for the point, which is weird to say. I'm ecstatic because of the way it came. I'm really hopeful that it is the turning of the tide, that this can take the momentum forward. Don't get me wrong, I'm really, really hopeful. I want it to be the turning point of our season.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But I am very scared that a lot of the maneuvers were so kind of, I've got to do something because it's the end, that we won't necessarily see those again unless we get another situation where it's like, this is the end of my career.
Yeah, I mean, you've summed it up absolutely perfectly. I don't think there's a point that you haven't mentioned that I could mention. That verbatim sort of followed my thoughts. And the point that you finished off on just then, which was that, all the decisions we've seen in against Man City and then against Brighton and so on, they felt panicked, as opposed to it being like a tactical, prowess. It was, I've got to do something here because my job's on the line and I've got to be seen to do something. And that's exactly what worries me about his comments that worry you about going back to the back four. No headache about who's the goalkeeper when Johnston's fit, implying that it'll be Johnston. So what you're saying, Gary, is we'll be going back to exactly what got us in this position in the first place.
Yeah.
And the more time, and this is what worried me, and this is why, actually reflecting on the result, there was a small part of me, and I know this is bad to say, that I was almost annoyed that we drew, because I just feel like it buys him more time, and the more time he's bought, the more time it gives him the sort of slim justifications to, go back to his ways, as opposed to make these decisions that have worked for us in the recent weeks.
I hope.
So yeah.
I hope more than anything that we're wrong. I hope that he pulls it out the bag, and these next few games against the not top six, he even if he does go to a back four and proves us all wrong, and they off the back of this momentum, they do scintillating stuff and score goals and win, I'll be so happy. I'll be so happy, and I don't want that to fail in any way. I want it to be successful.
No, of course,
yeah. It's just, and I'm just anxious, I guess, because it has been so confusing and so at times mismanaged, that you just fret that it's all going to be wasted. And I don't want it to be wasted, because we've seen so much optimism. We've seen, even in losing situations, Strand Larsen scoring goals. Cunha still, yes, he's had some bad moments because he gets a little bit emotional perhaps, but still, with moments of quality. And I hope that the likes of Sarabia coming on, whether it is desperation or play or not, reminds Gary O'Neill that actually there's other people in the squad here that can help him like they did last season, so there's moments, there's things to be joyful. And all I hope is, I will say, to make you smile towards the end, is that if they go to a back four, then I want to see Dawson and Bueno in that centre two, just to make you happy there, Will, and everyone else, because I think he's earned a chance to start alongside him if we go in a back four over Totti at the moment, to see how that rides out given that second half. And I think, as I say, if it's a centre two, like deeper midfielders, then whether it's Gomez or Andre or Lamina, one of those alongside Doyle, because I think, especially after a man of the match performance, has earned again the position like Sarr to try and have an opportunity to hold that spot. And then your front three potentially got to be Strand Larsen, Cunha, and then the third spot is up for grabs. Could it be Sarabia? Could it be Forbes? I mean, there's all sorts of Gomez. That third spot I think is still kind of being battled for. Forbes, which is good. Forbes came on, and the first few minutes was effective, and then I think they realized how fast he was, and they had to really cover that side, because then he kind of got shut down. He wasn't the first few minutes when they were not ready for him. He was having opportunities, and then they kind of covered that side a bit. But that's what opened up some of the space for the likes of Sarabia then to find those pockets, and Cunha to have more impact. So he was both effective and not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense, and I think there's a lot of points you made there which we can go on in future episodes to discuss it. In a lot more detail, but there's just something just before we finish up, and I will ask you this question to conclude today's episode.
Okay.
Which is that when Wolves put out a post on Instagram when Cunha scored that 93rd minute equaliser, did you see who commented their support on that post?
Oh my gosh, is it going to be your favourite of all time? Is it going to be Neves?
It is. I wanted to mention that before we conclude, because it popped into my head when we spoke about him earlier, and it's really bad actually how he keeps cropping up in each of our episodes, Chris. It's sorry,
it's a feature.
I've upset myself here. I've upset myself on what was, off the back of a good result and a good episode.
Just think, Will, Doyle could be your new Neves.
We cannot replace him.
Just saying. The mould is there.
Look, if there's a mould of Ruben Neves, Right, on that note, Chris, thank you for joining me. And everybody, thank you for listening. We'll be back again later on in the week, and hopefully, be gearing us towards a positive result against Palace at the weekend. But for now, that's all from me. And Chris, is it all from you as well?
It is. Take care, everyone.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.